Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. In the last 2 to 3 days, Ukraine has launched a major offensive, I think, in the Zaporozhye region, which I can only absolutely criticize. This was suicidal. This was sending hundreds, possibly thousands of Ukrainians to certain death. Uh, and this becomes more foolish the more you think about it. For first one day, they launched this massive attack against Russian forces, and they never even reached the point where they could actually see the opposing Russian forces because uh, now the Russians actually they waited until the Ukrainians reached a certain point. They held back. Uh, several reasons for this because they were entering into a pocket, a salient there. Uh, but by waiting, they also saw exactly what strategies the Ukrainians would intend to use in a large scale battle. So, as they came up, the Ukrainian forces came up in a large group and then they split off in different directions. All right, that told the Russians this is what the Ukrainians are going to do. And the Ukrainians have been very, very slow to adapt any of their strategies. You think about Bakhmut, and they just kept on doing the same thing over and over and over. So what happened here was that the Russians waited and then started striking with artillery, with drones, with missiles, and helicopters. They literally, or they nearly just wiped out that entire attacking force. So that was day one. On day two, the Ukrainians did the exact same thing in the exact same pattern and had the same results. Okay, so if you had enough forces to do this 2 days in a row, why wouldn't you just send all of them all at once in an attempt to overpower the Russian defenses in that area? Why are you going to do the same thing 2 days in a row, seeing what the result was the first time and then doing it again and expecting something to change? Why would you do that? And Bakhmut, you think about what they did there. They kept on sending 1,000 men here, 2,000 men there, and they just kept on getting wiped out until the city was taken, and you know, anyway, estimates are still vary, but estimates say that the Ukrainians lost uh, casualties, deaths, and injuries, anywhere up to around 100,000 men fighting for Bakhmut. Part of this is NATO training. Not just NATO training, but direct NATO advisors, directives, Ukraine being told, do this. They're given NATO, including U.S., especially U.S. intelligence, and so it's well known that many Ukrainian commanders have been trained in NATO countries on NATO tactics. So this is how they were trained. And it seems very clear that the NATO training strategies, tactics, are highly inflexible. You do something once that fails, you do the same thing all over again. It takes them years, months, years to adapt their tactics. I'm going to say the Russians are a lot more nimble. They have been advancing, changing their strategies, their tactics, all along from the beginning of this. They did not start off striking utility, power distribution centers. They've at every point they've developed entirely new technologies. Some of this, I'm going to say, is probably from reverse engineering of other technologies, from things that they have captured in the field, reverse engineered, but they did that in no time. Now, their defense industry is nationalized. Yeah, you can say socialized, and to some extent. Although they have, contractors, it's not the same thing as here. Over there, the government analyzes, develops new technologies, and goes to the contractor and says, here, build this. So they keep on doing that. But the main point, the title of this, I'm going to say this was inspired by a discussion I heard with, Scott Ritter. NATO places these limits on NATO members on the technologies and strategies and tactics that they are able to use. So they expect a one-size-fits-all approach to warfare, just like the EU expects a one-size-fits-all social policy to apply to every country in NATO, and the U.S. expects a one-size-fits-all to work for every country on Earth, and it just does not work. You wind up with a lot of animosity there. But as far as the equipment, they talk about this interoperability. And NATO is a proving ground for that interoperability. You think about all of the various weapons that have flooded into Ukraine from different countries. And what are the problems that they have run into? You got different size artillery, different types of anti-aircraft, and so much, just probably even different size small arms and different calibers. Even though NATO has a standard caliber for their rifles, that doesn't apply to all small arms. Just a second. So this has caused major, uh, a logistical nightmare. Yeah, you even think like 120 millimeter shells. You would think that you can take a 120 millimeter shell from a German tank and put it into a British tank, and both of them will fire the same ammunition. That's not the case. Uh, you, the German tank as has a smooth bore cannon, and the British Challenger has got a rifled bore cannon. You cannot take the ammunition from either one of these and put it into the other tank and expect it to work. What you will do is cause the either a complete failure to fire or you'll kill the tank crew. So you got different engines. You cannot take an engine from a German tank and put it into a British tank, or vice versa. You can't, or et cetera, et cetera. This just doesn't work. You wind up needing separate supply chains for a Bradley, a Stryker, this type of tank, that type of tank. You know, on and on. Oh, going back to the NATO strategies or whatever, that while the Ukrainians were doing all of this, they've still got at least a few jets and a number of helicopters that have been given to them, and not one jet or helicopter was involved in this defensive. As far as drone usage, they had one or two successes, well, a handful of successes with drone usage during this attack, but it was negligible. It was virtually nothing. Now, I don't know if they just failed to use drones for this attack, or if the anti-drone measures used by the Russians were so effective that virtually nothing actually hit a target. The drones seem to be effective, fairly effective in other areas, so I'm not thinking it was anti-drone technology. They just didn't do that. So they literally just used drones when they know that the Russians have air superiority, artillery, missiles, all of that. But was this NATO training in action? NATO directives? Who knows? With all of the propaganda that's been pushed, then we can expect that the answer is yes. All right, so the difference between going on with this, the difference between Western weapons and Russian weapons. Russia has stated that the T-90M is the most advanced tank globally that has been produced, and this is true. This has been proven. I've seen a video where a T-90M got struck with anti-aircraft measures 3 times. 3 times, direct hit, and it still kept moving. The most vulnerable part of a tank is the top portion where the armor is the thinnest. This tells me that they have improved the armor on the top of this tank so that it is Now, they do have reactive armor mounted on it, but that only does just so much good. This and Western vehicles have you know, reactive armor on top of them as well, quite often, and yet they still get taken out with a single strike. Now, the T-90M is the single Russian vehicle that has the most modern design. Are all of their vehicles this resistance to a strike from above? The answer is obviously no, because many of their vehicles have been taken out by drone strikes and so forth, and anti-tank weapons, etc. So, no, I mean, they're not. Their entire fleet is not invincible, but this thing is. I mean, I used to be a tank mechanic. I used to be a track mechanic in the U.S. Army when the M1 tank first came out. Now, there have been two versions of the M1 tank. The later version has thicker armor, but those are not the ones that are going to be supplied to Ukraine. There was the M1A1 and the M1A2, and it's M1A1s with the thinner armor that are going to be supplied to Ukraine. But we haven't produced any new M1 tanks anyway since 2012. Most Americans don't know that. We're just not we're not building them now. All that's happening is the refurbishing of old ones. Anyway, so in addition, I've seen another video where a T-90M with drone sighting struck a target that was 5 kilometers away. 5 kilometers. So this indicates something else. Now, in discussions online, I understand that our equipment can also do this. They can strike a target that is 10, possibly 15 kilometers away. This is well beyond sights. So what that means is that, and this was not a guided round. This thing struck. That means that the tank crew, they had the technology and the knowledge of how to use it to calculate a trajectory to hit a target that requires extreme precision. You don't learn that kind of thing in 4 to 6 weeks of training, which is what the Ukrainians are largely being given on Western equipment. So, interoperability. Interoperability is not a matter of technology. The people that are trying to sell this interoperability are weapons contractors. And yet, their equipment, as you can see, are not interoperable. Interoperability comes from a command structure that allows for flexibility for field conditions. The top brass gives a directive to go after this target, this area, to achieve a certain objective. Then the field commanders at each level, they're commanders for a reason. They can change different things. There is communication. There is coordination, which the Ukrainians have shown people that have come back, people that ground troops, and so forth that have been interviewed have said there's no coordination, there's no communication among the different factors. You cannot just, all of these game changers haven't changed the game except to elicit a change in the strategies and tactics of the Russians. They haven't won anything. The Russians are advancing. In the last few days, the Ukrainians have lost possibly more armored vehicles, more military vehicles than at any time since this conflict began. Like I said, these are deaths. I'm not worried about the vehicles. I'm worried about, I am concerned about the fact that the Ukrainian culture is being wiped out. These men are they are husbands, fathers, sons, brothers. These are members of the Ukrainian society that is being completely eliminated before our eyes. Yeah, just dump all of the weapons into a big pit and bury them for all I care. It's the people that I am concerned about. Interoperability. For interoperability, you have to have extensive training from the lowest private up to the top general. So technology does not really change anything. And the Western technology, they've said that Ukraine is a test platform for Western technology. Well, these tests have failed. The Patriot missile system has failed. It is no match for the Russian hypersonic missiles, which took out 5 Patriot, I don't know if it was systems or components, but when a Kinzhal missile struck near Kiev, it took out the Patriot system. We haven't seen a Patriot firing since that time. If they have any left, they've been directed not to use it. When you fire it, then you reveal the location of it, and it becomes a target. If it becomes a target and another one gets taken out, then it illustrates just how poorly it performs. The Challenger tanks, the UK instructed Ukraine not to use them. I think they only donated 14, but not one Challenger tank has been seen on the front line. They've had them for a few months now, and not one Challenger has been seen on the front line. Bradleys by the score have been knocked out. Strikers, dozens. The Leopard tanks have been taken out by the score. If you don't have communication and coordination, then you don't have interoperability. It is not about the technology. You had interoperability in World War I, in World War II. You have to, throughout history, strategy, a comprehensive strategy, adaptability, flexibility built into that that is what gives you interoperability. Communication is what gives you that. Otherwise, you don't have it, period. So, but they keep on focusing so much on what is going to profit the weapons manufacturers. Oh, this technology is a game changer. No, the technology is not a game changer. It is the knowledge, the skill of how to use it, which is a game changer. So, because of this dependence on all of these various weapons that cause a logistical nightmare because of NATO training, Ukraine is losing quickly. Russia is taking territory. They are advancing. And still, no peace talks. So, more people are dying. What is the next step here? What is the next game changer? They're talking about F-16s, which won't reach Ukraine until next year, and with insufficient training for the pilots. That's not going to be a game changer. They'll just be knocked out of the skies. And is there going to be any ground force remaining by next year? Right now, it's not looking like it. It's time to sit down and talk. All right, share this video, talk about these subjects. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this channel and my presidential campaign, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a good day.